8 years after the conclusion to Rocksteady's critically acclaimed Batman Arkham trilogy, we now finally have the next chapter in the Arkhamverse story. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League has had an incredibly bumpy road to launch and has caused much debate amongst fans regarding the game's quality and the very nature of the game itself. A quick note to everyone, this video will contain spoilers for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I have been a huge DC fan for my entire life. When this game was first announced, I was super excited to play a new DC game, and even more so to hear that it's part of the Arkhamverse. However, once we started getting more details on the game, doubt and worry began to creep in. Live service, monetization, looter shooter. These red flags kept popping up more and more as Warner Bros. Games and Rocksteady unveiled details about this game. This is not what fans wanted. Prior to launch, the game began receiving more and more backlash and criticism from DC and Rocksteady fans alike, as well as the gaming community as a whole. We're done with the live service model. Players have become wise to the greedy monetization tactics of publishers and are starting to fight back now. Suicide Squad was the breaking point for many, and the current sales numbers show that gamers are fighting back with their wallets. In spite of all the live service model red flags, I was still cautiously optimistic for this game. That optimism has unfortunately faded as the realities of the game set in during my playthrough. While I did have a good time with much of the game, I'm still not sure I can in good conscience recommend this game. Is Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League worth your time and money? Let's get into it.
Going airborne! How you feeling, Floyd? Ready to kick your ass. You think you can stop us? Spaces. Breathe. Okay. Need a plan to deal with these crazy sons of... You're already awake, aren't you?
Actually, I'm the son of a god. It is my shame to suffer mortals and their buffoonery.
I have to commend Rocksteady for the exceptional cinematic cutscenes in this game. They continue to impress with their cinematic style and approach to storytelling within their DC games. Brilliant, captivating, and believable performances from the entire cast bring these characters to life. They really nailed the squad dynamic, with characters bouncing off each other, hurling insults, and throwing out some jokes, which actually landed for me. Initially, I was concerned that the back and forth banter between squad members and the support squad would be cringy and uncomfortable. But to my surprise, after the opening mission, it wasn't an issue, and most of the dialogue felt natural and was genuinely funny on occasion. Particularly interactions involving Harley Quinn. All of this, coupled with what has to be some of the best motion capture I have seen to date, makes for some truly immersive cinematic storytelling.
Sharkman, pull that brake lever.
Guys, I thought working together would be a train wreck, and you do not disappoint.
In terms of pacing, the game almost feels like it's split into two very distinct halves. The first half is a slow and steady build, with intrigue and excitement, growing as a squad to the point where you can finally take down your first Justice League member. After you accomplish this, the second half of the game then rushes you through the remaining League members and the overall narrative at what sometimes feels like breakneck pace. This sudden shift in pacing pulled me out of the experience a bit and fractured the story. The pace of the second half is clearly pushing players to move on to the end game, rather than focusing on the story and ensuring fans experience a satisfying narrative conclusion. As a result, the remaining League encounters just don't carry the same weight or provide the same sense of achievement.
Superman! Oh, fuck, it's Superman!
The story itself is a mixed bag. I think certain characters such as Wonder Woman, Lex Luthor, and Task Force X themselves are well written, feeling like faithful adaptations of their comic book counterparts. In fact, this version of Wonder Woman is one of my favorite interpretations of the character ever. From her stoic heroism and calm, composed mindset to her absolutely incredible Amazonian armor, this is a damn near perfect version of the character.
Taste the fury of the sea, Amazon!
I feel like the squad themselves are also well written. At first I was worried they were going to be very cringy and annoying to listen to as I played, but they quickly grew on me.
I mask my insecurities with drink and bad behavior. Oh.
I think the incredible voice performances had a huge role in selling me on Task Force X's growing camaraderie and strengthening bonds as the story progresses. Big props to the writers for actually having some funny jokes that were genuinely funny and really landed for me.
Harley, get us out of this!
Harley, do not touch us.
But you saying I can't really makes me want to, you know?
No!
Harley, no!
Worth it.
However, there were some jokes which absolutely did not land, and a few moments in the story which were straight up disrespectful to these legendary DC heroes and to their fans.
Step on me next.
I found these moments to be in poor taste and left me feeling a bit uneasy. My biggest problem with Suicide Squad is its treatment of the Justice League. These are iconic heroes that many of us have idolized since we were kids, yet in this game, there's a scene in which, after defeating the Flash, Captain Boomerang unzips his trousers and pisses on the Flash's corpse. The rest of the squad then proceed to compliment him on the size of his dick. I am not joking, this is in the game.
As honorable warriors, we will show proper respect to this fallen hero by...
Show a little class, man. Holy shit. Congratulations.
Makes sense. The gods have cursed you in every other way.
What's even more surprising is that this wasn't the moment which bothered me most. The game is subtitled Kill the Justice League, so naturally I expect the League to meet their demise, and that in itself isn't the issue. The treatment of each iconic League member before and after their deaths is very disheartening and sometimes painful to watch. The exception to this being Wonder Woman, who, as I previously alluded to, is treated with the respect she deserves and feels like a true representation of the character. Wonder Woman was the only character to have a true hero's death after several awesome scenes of her going toe-to-toe with the Man of Steel himself. This game is our first introduction to the Justice League in the Arkhamverse, and we never get to know and connect with these heroes, as 4 out of 5 of them are brainwashed by Brainiac and acting completely out of character for the majority of the game. This lack of personal connection is another factor which really limits the impact of fighting these DC icons. The way the game moves at such rapid pace leaves no time for the Justice League hero deaths to sink in. The game immediately pushes you on to the next fight, so fighting the League ultimately feels insignificant and pointless. This further disappoints, as introducing these legendary characters in this game for this purpose feels like a huge waste of potential. This being part of the Arkhamverse and the follow-up to Rocksteady's Batman Arkham trilogy, we have to take a moment to talk about Batman in Suicide Squad. Yes, this is the same Batman that we played as in Arkham Asylum, City, Origins, and Night. Unfortunately, in this game, Batman is brainwashed and under the control of Brainiac for the entirety of the game. As such, he doesn't really resemble the Batman we know so well. This Batman confuses me, and what totally baffles me is how Rocksteady has treated this character. This character catapulted Rocksteady into the public eye and the Video Game Hall of Fame. Their work with this character revolutionized the superhero gaming genre, which had a ripple effect that positively impacted the gaming industry as a whole. So to see what they have done with the character in this game was truly heartbreaking. The death of the Batman in the Arkhamverse should feel like a huge moment of genuine sacrifice and loss. Instead, we saw Batman go out with a whimper, not a bang. Having Harley be the one to finally kill Batman could have been great and had so much potential. However, the moment wasn't fueled by revenge, as Harley had already moved on from Joker off screen in between games. This wasn't a grandiose moment or super challenging, satisfying boss battle either. Harley executes a captive Batman on a park bench just to get Superman's attention. And the game doesn't stop for a single beat to let you react to the death of your hero. Despite my distaste for the way in which Batman was written, it was gratifying and comforting to once again hear the voice of the late great Kevin Conroy as the Caped Crusader.
Green Lantern, I have the Flash. Your 4 escaped criminals. They led me right to him. No, not a threat at all. Still, let their corpses strike fear into those who'd resist.
Mr. Conroy put in another stellar performance and clearly had a lot of fun exploring this corrupt, evil take on Batman. He has been the voice of the Batman for decades and will forever be the voice I hear when I read a Batman comic book. Thank you for everything, Kevin. You were the hero we needed, and far more than we deserved. Rest in peace, Dark Knight. The story of Suicide Squad starts out strong, but by the end, it's clearly just an uninspired setup for the endgame grind and live service model. All tension, interest, and excitement built up throughout the game is suddenly brought to a halt as you enter the final mission of the story, and the live service elements completely take over the narrative, leaving players with a disappointing and forgettable ending to a very divisive campaign.
I don't know you.
What are you doing, mate?
I'm smiling.
You're right. Terrify the bastard. Perfect. Good to get out of that place.
Just checking. We're all seeing that thing, right?
In Suicide Squad, Rocksteady has traded the familiar, dark, gritty, neon-lit streets and rain-soaked, gargoyle-adorned rooftops of Gotham City for the bright, vibrant, futuristic cityscape of Metropolis. I think the iterations of Gotham City that we've seen in previous Rocksteady games have a much stronger atmosphere and are ultimately more memorable than Metropolis, with more recognizable landmarks. That being said, I strongly believe that Metropolis is a beautiful, highly detailed, vibrant world which hasn't gotten the full credit it deserves. I personally prefer the gothic Gotham streets, but I cannot deny the achievements of this world and all the work and craftsmanship that it took to build it. Metropolis is bright, colourful, and absolutely loaded with fun Easter eggs and references to other DC characters and comic books. Riddler trophies, challenges, and plain old riddles litter the map, as well as these tears in the fabric of space and time, which offer some insight as to how Metropolis fell to Brainiac and his forces. The city is easy to traverse as Task Force X once you've become acquainted with each squad member's unique traversal methods. Perhaps too easy. The problem is the traversal mechanics generally have you moving across rooftops at a rapid pace, in some cases even moving above the rooftops in the sky. Most combat encounters also take place on the rooftops above the city. This means most players completely miss all the cool references and details in the streets and on building fronts in the city. I know this because I was one of those players. For the majority of the game's campaign, I missed the finer details and most of the personality of this world because I spent so much time on the rooftops, moving above it or fighting Brainiac's forces on a desolate planet across the multiverse. This is what the game pushes you to do. After taking some time to move at street level, I had much more appreciation for this world and the work put into it. Metropolis is an evolving city. Although in this case, devolving may be a more apt descriptor. Brainiac's control over Metropolis grows throughout the game, culminating with Brainiac deploying terraforming devices in an attempt to transform the world into a new Colu. By the time you reach the endgame, the world is dull, grey, and covered in enough sand to give Anakin Skywalker nightmares. Much of what gave Metropolis its charm is gone by this point, and it baffles me why the developers would make this decision to cover up and destroy the unique and vibrant city they created. The endgame missions of Suicide Squad take place elsewhere in the multiverse, in alternate versions of Metropolis which Brainiac has already conquered. Sadly, these are all dull, repetitive, small partitions of the main open world map, the only difference being the city is now in ruins and covered in even more sand.
I'll pitch in on the shooting with me, Shark. Twitch taking damage.
There has been a lot of internet chatter and discourse claiming Suicide Squad is an ugly game with very outdated visuals. I don't agree with this, at least not entirely. Suicide Squad is a game with visuals which feel like they have one foot firmly rooted in the present age of high-resolution character models and flashy explosions, but the other foot in the past. Times gone by of muddy textures pop in and dull color palettes. As I mentioned before, Metropolis is vibrant and colourful, but also changes for the worse as the game goes on. In the endgame and the incursion missions in particular, the visuals become very dull and filled with browns and greys which resemble PS3 and Xbox 360 gen games, rather than the high fidelity and graphically mesmerising games of the current generation. The game is impressive in certain areas such as the fine level of detail on character models, specifically those of Task Force X. Other areas where things feel more outdated can be clearly spotted when comparing this game to Rocksteady's previous release, Batman Arkham Knight. The water is something which immediately jumps out to me. Arkham Knight, a game which released in 2015, has a far more impressive water simulation when you look at the choppy waves along the edges of Gotham. In Suicide Squad, the water is much less impressive and feels flat. In fact, many visuals feel flat in this game. The nature of Gotham being shrouded in shadow and having rain-soaked streets illuminated by huge neon lights allows for more depth to the visuals than Metropolis. However, I can't help but feel something is off every time I play. Overall, the game is graphically impressive, but it does have several shortcomings. I played on Xbox Series X and largely had a good experience with very few bugs and technical issues. Having pre-ordered the deluxe edition, I got 3-day early access to the game. Unfortunately, due to server issues, I was unable to play for several hours of that paid early access window. To Rocksteady's credit, they did give affected players a handful of in-game currency as an apology. Network and server issues did pop up occasionally during my playthrough, but I didn't find these interruptions to be too egregious. I only experienced one notable bug which occurred in the latter half of the game and involved an ice cream truck clipping into the road and getting stuck. Thankfully, a quick reload solved the issue. There have been many reports of other notable bugs, including the game-breaking autocomplete bug which occurred on the game's launch and automatically completed the game's campaign for some players logging in for the first time. For the most part, the game performed well, but I did have several noticeable frame rate dips and stutters, mostly during heavy combat sections. This wasn't enough to ruin the experience, but did become annoying as it occurred fairly frequently. Players on lower-end PC hardware or Xbox Series S may experience more impactful frame rate issues. The game's load times are fairly standard for modern-day systems. However, there is a general sluggishness to the game's menus as a result of the always online component and constantly having to connect to servers, which can cause some slowdown. Speaking of menus and UI, this game has a big UI problem. Everything in the menus feels far too similar, making it difficult to discern what it is you should be looking at and locate the options and data you are after. While the menus aren't very intuitive, that problem pales in comparison to the game's HUD. This HUD is so chaotic and overwhelming that when the game's combat really kicks off, it can be immensely overwhelming and even nauseating. At one point I found myself turning off several HUD elements and minimizing the amount of typical looter shooter jargon and numbers so I could actually see and make sense of what was going on during a particularly chaotic mission.
You're just making a mess and wasting my time, convicts.
Killed with a green lane brain construct.
Think I'm scared of you, man? I'm the one with the fear gun.
The sound design is great and one of the game's most consistent elements. As a looter shooter, the gunfire is a key component, and thankfully it is clear and punchy here. The same can be said of the explosions as well.
Quinn, serious.
Now you can attack the tower directly and get the payload moving. Aim for the weak spot. I assume you can tell which part that is.
I was happy to hear the enemy comms chatter from the Arkham games make a return here. As you move around the city, you will start to hear Brainiac's forces providing commentary on the events of the game up to that point, and generally chatting amongst themselves, completely unaware that you're about to drop in and destroy them. The music for Suicide Squad is, for the most part, forgettable and feels generic, like much of the game. There are some standout moments which break this trend, such as the main theme of the game, a track called "The Worst Is What We Do Best." The music is very electronic, and it seems like the aim was for it to match the frantic pace of combat and traversal to heighten the excitement and tension. However, I just don't think the music succeeds at this. Admittedly, I'm not a big fan of electronic music, but other games have pulled off similar types of scores which I actually really enjoyed. A great example of this is Cyberpunk 2077. Easily the best music in the game is the returning music from the Batman Arkham series. The game opens with a great callback to the opening of Batman Arkham Asylum, and uses the iconic score from that game for this scene. Much like the visuals, the sound can become an overwhelming mess. I think this really hurts the score, as when combined with the gunfire, explosions, enemy chatter and all the other sounds of combat, the music feels like more noise for the sake of noise. This, combined with the hectic HUD, UI and chaotic visuals, can result in an uncomfortable experience for some players.
Don't get hit by that artillery.
Full of alien guts.
Targeting Deadshot.
The gameplay of Suicide Squad can be split into 4 sections: combat, traversal, progression, and itemization. Combat is frenetic, colorful, and extremely explosive. Shooting is satisfying with punchy sound and explosive effects. These are by no means the best shooter mechanics I've ever seen, but they're serviceable and satisfying enough. Shooting controls feel fast enough and fluid. Given that this is a looter shooter, all squad members use guns as their primary weapons. The result is all squad members feeling very similar in combat. Deadshot has access to sniper rifles, assault rifles, and pistols. Boomerang can use shotguns, submachine guns, and sniper rifles. Harley Quinn makes use of pistols, submachine guns, and heavy weapons, while Shark fights with heavy weapons, shotguns, and assault rifles. There is a lot of overlap of weapons between characters, and nothing felt unique to each squad member. The differences between weapon classes themselves did feel significant. Enough so that I felt changing up loadouts or varying your squad's loadout is actually beneficial, especially for endgame missions. However, the melee options feel generic and fairly similar. This is due to how limited melee combat is in this game. Unlike Rocksteady's previous works, this combat system will not be revolutionizing the genre or industry, and simply doesn't compare to the gratifying free-flow combat of the Batman Arkham series. Melee combat feels weak for most of the game and clearly isn't the focal point of combat. This is a shame, as these characters should have wildly different combat styles but feel too similar here. Melee does let you use each character's iconic weapons, such as boomerangs. It's just unfortunate that more focus wasn't put on developing these iconic melee movesets to truly differentiate each character in combat. On the other hand, traversal is what makes each squad member feel really distinctive when playing Suicide Squad. Traversal is frenetic within combat encounters, but can feel a little sluggish in exploration and general movement around the city. Harley swings through the air using a stolen grapple gun and bat drone. Deadshot soars through the sky with a jetpack. Shark uses his ancient godly power to leap huge distances and drop down on enemies with devastating force. Boomerang uses a Speed Force gauntlet to zip through the city by throwing his boomerang and essentially teleporting to it by traveling at super speeds. The traversal mechanics are what truly differentiates these characters. Boomerang has the most interesting traversal by far. Shark and Harley can feel a little slow and cumbersome by comparison. When I started playing, all of the characters felt clunky to me, and traversal was difficult to control. There is definitely a big learning curve here, as by the time I was playing endgame missions at 60 hours in, I was easily zipping around with every character's traversal mechanics like it was second nature. This is one area I feel that Suicide Squad actually tops its Arkham predecessors. Traversal is integral to both exploration and combat in this game. Each character has special traversal attacks which often work well as clearing moves. The game's combat is built in such a way that you have to keep moving and switching things up, so it's a good thing that traversal is so fun and engaging here. The game is packed with riddles, Riddler trophies, and Riddler challenges. These challenges require a certain level of mastery over each squad member's traversal mechanics in order to unlock new cosmetic gear and customize your squad. The progression in Suicide Squad is satisfying at first, but quickly becomes a repetitive grind which fails to hold my attention and begins to bore me. This is a fault of the live service model implementation in this game. The game requires you to level up each of your squad members individually. The max level of each character is level 30. Upon reaching this level as one character, you begin to earn XP towards your squad level while you play as any max level character. Squad levels are a neat addition and gives you something to work towards well into the end game. However, it is very much still your typical live service looter shooter grind. Each character has their own skill tree which provides a nice but non-exhaustive list of options to customize your character build to your liking. The skills available both in core skill trees and the squad skills page allow for fairly meaningful customization to your build and enables players to truly play the way they want to. Just so long as the way you want to play is by shooting everything in sight with no meaningful melee combat system. Crafting materials can be earned primarily from completing contracts and shooting down drones abducting civilians to earn loot crates from Aaron Cash in the Hall of Justice. These materials allow you to craft weapons and mods as well as respec and reroll attributes of weapons in your inventory. You can also fuse elemental attributes to weapons with these materials in order to cause elemental damage and effects in combat. Itemization and loot is pretty typical of what you would expect from a looter shooter. Loot starts off well and feels fairly rewarding, but by the end of a roughly 10-hour campaign, I found myself scrapping the majority of it as I simply had no interest in or any need for many of the weapons and mod chips. Notorious and infamous loot acquired from endgame incursion missions provides much more interesting and unique weapons themed around various DC villains such as Bane, Two-Face, and Black Mask. Managing your loot is fairly straightforward, although I did find it an odd choice to not include some sort of bulk storage in the Hall of Justice. For additional high-level weapons and gear you aren't currently using, but want to save for future builds or upgrading down the line. As you would expect, XP is earned by completing missions as well as some bonus challenges. Bonus challenges involve defeating so many of a particular enemy type, getting so many kills with certain weapons and effects, and so on. The missions in Suicide Squad are extremely repetitive, even before you get to the end game, with uninspired objectives that conform to the generic live service looter-shooter model we are all too familiar with now. Go here, defend this, kill that, collect your loot, and repeat until the live service gods put an end to the online servers forever. The core missions of the game become even more repetitive when we reach the end game. Okay, so now we arrive at the bulk of the gameplay in this game. As a live service, the game lives or dies on the quality of its endgame. The endgame of Suicide Squad currently consists of 6 mission types, but 2 of those are the same mission just at different levels. These endgame missions are called incursions. Completing these missions at higher and higher difficulties called mastery levels rewards players with infamous and notorious gear as loot and increases their finite crisis level. This is when the game becomes a complete grind and I started to lose all interest in playing. The increased difficulty in these mastery levels mostly just comes from enemies turning into bullet sponges, making these incursion missions more frustrating and completing them no longer feels fulfilling. The incursion environments and maps are all far too similar and have very little variation. They all have that dull brown sand-washed look with little to no visual appeal, which only adds to the repetitiveness as you play through them. All of the endgame mission objectives feel very similar, and so far we have no unique raid or dungeon type missions that stand out in the endgame. One of the endgame incursion missions is a Brainiac boss fight. What's disappointing here is that we never really fight Brainiac, as he takes on the form of a Justice League member, including their abilities. In this case, Brainiac becomes a reskin of the first Flash boss fight in the game. It seems that future seasons of content updates will be adding further Brainiac boss fights in which he takes on the form of other League members, so will all future endgame bosses be recycles and reskins of the original bosses from the core campaign. The boss battles themselves throughout the game were a little underwhelming, often feeling cheap and uninspired. The defeat of each Justice League member feels unsatisfying and unearned due to the simplistic nature of each fight. Ultimately, they introduce no new interesting mechanics and encourage no unique strategies. Simply shoot them until they fall over and that's it. The first boss fight against the Flash was a good time and felt like a bit of a challenge compared to the enemies I had fought up until that point. It later became clear that the rest of the boss battles were not going to innovate and offer a meaningfully different challenge or experience. Knowing that the most likely plan for future endgame content is simply recycling these boss battles and depriving us of a genuine Brainiac boss battle is extremely disappointing. So, like many other aspects of this game, it's safe to say that gameplay is a mixed bag. Fun for the duration of the 10-hour campaign and in short bursts beyond that, but can quickly become stale and feel too repetitive for many players.
Practicing mindfulness.
Oh no! You four will not beat me!
Another win for Captain Boomerang!
2 of the biggest red flags in modern gaming are live service and monetization, and yep, this game has them both. So many new games, particularly AAA games, are now using a live service model to cover ballooning development budgets. Monetization is a key part of this approach, and many publishers have shown that their greed knows no bounds when it comes to implementing microtransactions, battle passes, and seasonal content. Compared to the kings of greed, EA and Activision, Rocksteady and Warner Bros. Games have been fairly reserved in their monetization. Taking a much more player-first and player-friendly approach, Rocksteady have so far implemented very few microtransactions and opted to make all new seasonal content free to players. Battle passes will have a premium tier which requires purchase but provides higher value rewards, and a free tier which offers more basic rewards at no charge. The first Battle Pass is yet to be released, so we will see what these rewards look like in the near future and be able to properly judge the system then. In another effort to be player friendly, Rocksteady has opted to take the same approach to Battle Passes as Halo Infinite. Each season's pass will not expire at the end of the season, so you can progress any season's Battle Pass at any time and not miss out on rewards. This approach respects the player's time and shows Rocksteady wants us to be able to get as much content as possible at our own pace. So while the approach to Battle Passes seems positive in this game, I very much have a problem with the microtransactions within this game. There may not be many so far, but the developers have split some of these cosmetic packs into tiers of increasing cost. Having pre-ordered the game, I received a classic outfits pack for each character. However, upon first browsing the store page, I discovered that this pre-order bonus only gave access to the lowest tier version of the classic packs, meaning players who have already pre-ordered the game and paid a minimum of £100 or $100 for the deluxe edition have to pay more if they want the full classic outfit packs for each squad member. Just when you think publishers can't get any more egregious with skin pack implementation, now we have different tiers for each pack in this game. Another pathetic excuse to lock more cosmetic customization behind additional paywalls. Being able to use various costumes is a key part of a superhero game. Rocksteady understood this in their previous games, and Insomniac continue to push this idea in their Spider-Man games. This horrible and very limited integration of different costumes in Suicide Squad is a direct result of its live service status. Only time will tell how the game's seasonal content unfolds, but the roadmap looks promising and it seems we have a good amount of free content to look forward to, starting with the Joker at the end of this month. Although some of the new skins that have been revealed for Season 1 are, well, they're interesting to say the least. Rocksteady have been open and honest with us on their live service approach, and I will commend them for that. I am still totally against live service and greedy monetization practices, but this is one of the most player-friendly live services I've seen in a long time.
Skill shot. This one's a drop and stop. Airstrike. Your little trinkets through tiresome hotness.
Personally, I did enjoy much of my time with this game. I have 80 hours of playtime for this video and will continue to jump back in occasionally when new content is added going forward. That being said, there are undeniable problems with the game, both in terms of its core design and its live service ball and chain. I feel the game would benefit from a tighter, more focused narrative without the grandiose of the multiverse, which was clearly forced in to support the live service model, and add some extra context to its bland mission structure. The traversal is fun and engaging, but the same can't be said about the combat. Although fun at the beginning, combat does start to lose its luster, and I would definitely prefer more melee-focused combat options to better differentiate each squad member's gameplay. Monetization is not egregious at present, and the live service is nowhere near as intrusive as other modern games, although it is still problematic. This game is often compared to Marvel's Avengers. I feel the constant comparisons to the Arkham trilogy are a bit unfair, as these are fundamentally two very different types of games. However, Marvel's Avengers is a live service online team game with an emphasis on loot and endgame grind. It is absolutely the same type of game as Suicide Squad, and as such makes for a great comparison. I believe Suicide Squad does a lot of things better than its Marvel counterpart, such as narrative and visuals. That being said, I think Marvel's Avengers does a better job at differentiating its roster of playable characters. Each Avenger has a unique combat system and skill trees which offer fun and noticeable upgrades. The balance of close range and long range combat options makes for more engaging encounters, and leads to more enjoyable online sessions as everyone feels like they're playing a different character, unlike the generic looter shooter run and gun style which everyone plays in Suicide Squad. Both games have very repetitive mission objectives and level design. However, I found Avengers much easier to play for long sessions with friends, and ultimately it was a slightly more rewarding experience for me. So there are still some things that I feel Rocksteady can learn from Marvel's Avengers, but as I mentioned before, Suicide Squad clearly has the upper hand in several areas. However, it remains to be seen if Suicide Squad will become the same microtransaction machine that Marvel's Avengers was prior to its delisting. Given the cost of the few cosmetic packs in the game so far, things are not looking so good on that front. If you are a die-hard DC fan, then absolutely get this game. I would maybe wait for a sale or give it a few months until more content is added to the game before you jump in. Already the game has seen sales of around 40% off. At this price, I would say it's definitely worth it for a DC fan. If DC isn't your thing or you're more of a casual fan, then I probably wouldn't recommend this game to you. I think even big looter shooter gamers will struggle to find the value and get their money's worth out of this game. The gameplay and endgame simply aren't enough to hold players long term, or even short term in some cases. Player numbers have already had huge dips within the first month. Warner Bros. Have also declared the game's sales to be a disappointment, saying it has set them up for a difficult year. These are factors that are important to consider as live service games live or die on continued developer and publisher support. Given the downward trajectory of sales and player count, it may not be worth investing your time and money in a game with such an uncertain future. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is a game I really wanted to love, but in the end it has disappointed me. I still think the game has potential and I will be jumping back in as seasonal content releases.